So as I mentioned, this is Earth Care Week. A few years ago at an international Buddhist meditation teacher meeting, a whole group of us, all of us, agreed that every October, the first week of October would be Earth Care Week, which means we spend all our Dharma talks and workshops and day-longs, etc., focusing on either our love for the world or of focusing on facing and responding to the crisis in the environment as Dharma. So that is why we have this evening, and we have Joanna Macy, who's probably the most qualified person on the planet to teach.
Don't say that.
Well, to teach this, how to use facing and responding to the cries of the earth as Dharma. Wouldn't you say you're qualified to teach that?
Well, I'm obsessed with it. That makes me qualified.
Okay, all right, good. Well, it's only been 50 years that she's been giving her whole life to this. So we're really fortunate, really, really grateful to have Joanna here. Joanna has been teaching and pioneering and leading in the fields of environmental activism and peace and social justice, engaged Buddhism for 50 some years. I don't know, 55, it's a long time. And she's a Buddhist scholar. She's an author of 8 books. Next month, the Naropa University is dedicating the Joanna Macy Center. And she'll be there for that dedication. Will be a center to make sure that we have collected and archived this extraordinary body of work and to ensure that that keeps going on long after Joanna is here. And there are other groups, one of which I'm part of, who are also doing projects like this, because what she's offering is, I believe, so very important to the world. So I could say so much about Joanna, but I think the one thing I want to say tonight is that she has not been afraid to face some of the most intractable and frightening issues of our time, like what do we do with nuclear waste? So the thing nobody wants to even look at, because there's not much you can do with nuclear waste, right? But she's been working and studying for years and years to look at that impossible question, or not impossible, that difficult question. Like the question, what do we do with millions of well-meaning people like us who can sometimes feel completely numb and frozen and overwhelmed when we hear the actual facts of what's happening to the earth? So Joanna doesn't turn away from that question. She has spent these decades innovating these incredible set of creative methodologies that help students move from apathy and fear and despair into collaborative action. And as far as I'm concerned, that movement right there is one of the most important things we need right now on earth, is just millions and millions of us moving into action. It might sound like it's heavy, these are heavy topics, and she's not afraid of grief, and she's not afraid of anger and all that. But I just want to say, as I finish this introduction, is that Joanna is fun. She's playful, she's joyful. And I think that's important for us to know, that you can give your whole life facing the darkest things on earth and be so filled with joy. So that is inspiring and empowering, and with that I will
I feel as if I should do a little dance or something.
Yeah.
We'll be very serious tonight.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. So tonight I want to walk around with reflections and stories
around a central image. And it's one that I know is familiar to many of you. Although it comes from Mahayana Buddhism, it comes from a school of called the Huayan Buddhism, where the Buddha's central doctrine of Paticcasamuppada, which is dependent co-arising, the radical interdependence of all phenomena, spiritual, mental, physical, organic, radically interconnected. And everything else he talked, about self and thought, his subtle and elegant psychology, his basic Dharma message was simply, again and again, different ways of understanding a view of reality that was not a hierarchical, where you escape from the suffering world, the broken world, and ascend to a place of unity, illumination, and so. But the very centrality of this, and it was represented in the wheel, wasn't it? And it was represented in the tree, that represented in I'm thinking of the 4 symbols of his life, which were elephant, that was his birth, out the side of his mama. I don't know, she conceived with a dream of the elephant. Elephant, and then his enlightenment, the tree, and his preaching and teaching, the wheel, and then the stupa for his death. Yeah, so he's just a mortal like us, not an ordinary mortal particularly, but none of us is just an ordinary mortal. Mortals don't come in generic, everyone's distinctive. And so he was pretty distinctive. But it was not, isn't it wonderful that he was just a person? And at any rate, so this image echoes the basic insight of the Buddha, of this radical interdependence, reciprocally related, like a great reciprocity at the heart of the universe. And that image is the jewel net of Indra. And it appeared in, as I told you, in around between the 4th and 8th century AD and Common Era. This image, so let's just enjoy it. Indra, who's he? Well, he was, I don't know why they chose Indra for having made this, except he was from the Indian pantheon, and he was both omnipotent and clever, which doesn't always go together, as we are seeing. And so he's created this net that goes in all directions and dimensions. You can imagine a kind of fish net. And then at every node of the net, there's a jewel. And there you see them all, glinting and gleaming. And they're going, see, there's not a hierarchy there. There's a vastness there. And there's also a relatedness. How come? Well, if you look at one, so let's look at one jewel or pearl, sometimes they're called. Now, we won't say pearl because you don't cut facets in a pearl that I know about. So you look at one of them and you see that it is got many, many facets. And they're all like that. So what does that mean? That means that they are reflecting off each other. And you look at this one, And then you see reflections from all the others. And not only that, but you see the reflections of them reflecting you. So that there's this incredible mutual interactivity, interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it. Now that's become very popular because it's incredibly close to a way you could portray our holotropic vision of reality that you get with some modern scientists like Karl Pribram and a number of others. And thinking of Stan Grof, for example, whose experiments with mind-altering substances around the primal experience of life of birth, he was trying to get back to see how what we remember of that, how that influenced our whole life, and he could find through that coming into consciousness, through first mind-altering substances, LSD, and then breathing, that there were memories coming that couldn't be identified with your biography, that were beyond what one could trace of what you know in this bag of skin in this lifetime. It's as if you look into one of us and the whole world is there. So that's something that's becoming more familiar to the exploratory modern mind or postmodern mind. So the first story I want to tell is about how it was about 36 years ago, which means I was just 50. See if you can add. That's going to be very hard for you to add up to figure out how old I am. And I was in Sri Lanka. And I had gone there. My youngest had finished high school, so I flew the nest and went on a year or so field work with a Buddhist social change movement, community development movement called Sarvodaya, borrowed from Gandhi, but based on Buddhist teachings predominantly. And so it was, instead of the uplift of all, which Gandhi meant by Sarvodaya, you're kind to all, you lift them up. They put Buddhist meaning into the same word and called it the awakening of all. Isn't that neat? Because that's what the Buddha did. And that's what they maintained everyone can do. And you wake up to, at the village level, you wake up at the family level, you wake up in your work, and you wake up to your power. And as I heard them saying, and your power is not in this, is not in Colombo, it's here. Colombo's their capital city, as you all certainly know. And, or your power is not in the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund or the donor nations from Europe. Your power is here in your own hands. You're waking up to that. Yeah, isn't that great? So I had just come from years of completing my doctoral work in Buddhism, and I focused on this doctrine of dependent co-arising, this central. You know, the Buddha said, she who sees paticca sees the Dharma. Whoever looks at the Dharma sees paticca, dependent co-arising, this or conditioned co-arising, this emerging together, passing together. So I had, in doing so, become convinced of the radical potential of the Buddhist path, that this could be really revolutionary in the forces that helped people experience in their work in every aspect of their lives, but especially in a world that was causing political and economic systems causing a lot of distress. So I thought, someday I want to give myself to that. We will find in the Buddha Dharma a liberation Buddhism, where we will wake up and have our whole cultures wake up to justice and common sense and ecological sanity and mutual respect. Then I got to Sri Lanka, so from my studies, and as I met with the people in the headquarters, I was not at all surprised to hear them talking this. What I was surprised was to go out to the villages and hear in ordinary village workers and the people who were organizers that they were talking like this, and they were believing themselves and doing extraordinary things. So I was so bowled over by this, and I remember the moment that I had this thought. It came as a shout, and I was on a motorcycle. It was my motorcycle, and I had learned to drive it at 50. And I had just seen that there was truth in their advertising about Sarvodaya. This is what they were doing in the villages, and this is how they talked, and that they would. And so I shouted, "I've woken up in Indra's net." And so that's our theme tonight. And the discoveries I made were many, and they're in a book that I wrote from that on Sarvodaya. I didn't bring it to offer you tonight because this was before the 30 years of atrocious civil war that has racked Sri Lanka. And because chauvinist Buddhist monks, nationalist Buddhist monks, had quite a role to play in it, this was for everyone who loves Sri Lanka and loves the Buddha Dharma and loves Sarvodaya, was caught in this. There was a sense of what did it be like people who had just heard the gospel of Jesus Christ and the liberation theology, and coming and hearing Jerry, well, he's not around now, but hearing these fundamentalist crazies. So there's that kind of. At any rate, I'm talking too long about that. I woke up then in Indra's net, seeing how they used the Buddha Dharma as part of their development training, how they used metta and also mudita, karuna, mudita, upekkha as tools as important as knowing what forms to fill out to get a grant from the irrigation department, or how deep to have the people dig a latrine. You learn that metta. You start your meetings with it. And the way they understood who they were, and the way they understood what compassion was, and courage. It's not just being softly, tenderly compassionate, but so sensitive, but being strong enough to look right into the face of the suffering of our world and not be afraid of it. So that's my current definition of compassion. You like it? To be courageous, to not afraid of the suffering of your world. Okay. So now, now I fast forward to the last 15 years, and I think I can see how the sense of peril and out of controlness has grown, a panic. And matching the panic on one side, I see them as two ditches on the way we're going toward a life-sustaining society. A ditch on one side is shut down. It's too much for me. I can't face it. And so that's just that we're a shutdown culture in many ways. And that's one ditch. And the other is very closely related, is panic, paralysis and panic. Because things seem, the militarism, the violence, the insanity of the wars, the torture, the legitimization of torture, the contamination, the fooling around with the DNA of living forms, ways you can't undo, the injecting of chemicals into the groundwater, and we don't have much on this planet. You can't take it out again after that hydrofracking. The playing around with nuclear power and weapons. We're spending more now on nuclear weapons than at any time in the Cold War. So that there's a sense of, and it is in this time that the jewel net of Indra comes forward to me in with such evocative and revelatory power of, hey, honey, just look at this structure of reality. And it meant so much that in this new phase that I asked a friend of mine involved in nuclear work, abolition of nuclear weapons, and she's a musician, and another friend who is in the military, and to set it to music. Set what to music? How can you set an image of jewels? Well, there is in the literature of that time a beautiful set of instructions and it's called the 10 enterings of the Bodhisattva. So the Bodhisattva, that's you or me, when we have a caring for the world and an intention to serve life on earth. And then that intention sharpens your eyes, and the Dharma, then, if you let it, can reveal to you the intricate interplay of all that is. Right where you are. You don't have to ascend to heaven or go anywhere else. No, but just right here. You can turn this very moment into heaven and into a sense of strong, sustaining participation. So these 10 enterings set to music, and I'm going to play them for you, and I want you to just listen. What you will hear in various modes is that there is a juxtaposition of the part and the whole, the small and the large, and that the Bodhisattva can go into any one person and see the whole world. The Bodhisattva can go, I think, enter one hair and come out in all the universes. The Bodhisattva can go into one moment and come out in all 3 times, past, present, future, or can enter all infinite times and come out in the present moment. So it really helps set you free from the linearity that you start here and go to another place. It's like a pulsing of characteristics of part and whole. Once you begin to try to allow yourself to imagine that the whole of everything, that wholeness, is in you. You come out of that in every cell of your body. So that relates you to everything else, every tree, every plant, every kernel of corn, every baby that's born, everyone who's passing now. This, and yet each one is distinct. Okay, so can we play it? The singer is my friend Kathleen Sullivan.
When a Bodhisattva attains the 10 wisdoms, she can then perform the 10 universal entries. What are they? To bring all the universes into one hair, and one hair into all the universes. To bring all sentient beings' bodies into one body, and one body into all sentient beings' bodies. To bring inconceivable kalpas into one moment, and one moment into inconceivable kalpas. To bring all the Buddha's dharmas into one dharma, and one dharma into all the Buddha's dharmas. To bring an inconceivable number of places into one place, and one place into an inconceivable number of places. To bring an inconceivable number of organs into one organ, and one organ into an inconceivable number of organs.
With that vision, you can get it that one child near Fukushima with cancer, with radiation in their body, it's all our children, or it's all of us. With that understanding, you can see the tides of refugees fleeing Eritrea and Syria, standing on the borders in Europe, seeking a place where they don't have to live in terror and want, having uprooted themselves from their own beloved culture, and know that we're not separate from them, that we can live with that communion with them inside us, and let that feed our hearts and minds. I think that understanding of our relationship around the world with all beings and through all space and time, I see it influencing so many people. I see it in Pope Francis. I see it in the doctors of Médecins Sans Frontières, who are just bombed in Kunduz. I said to Kathleen when I handed her these, written out these 10 entries, I said, there's one that makes no sense to me, so you can leave it out. And it's the one, I don't know whether you caught it, where it says, there is, you can enter all organs and come out in one non-organ, and one non-organ in all organs. That doesn't make any sense to me. And she said, oh, that's the most important one of all. You see, she's working in nuclear abolition, and she says, like, that's the plutonium. We have so spread the contamination of a bunch of things that there are non-organic things in our bodies. Yeah. So I've made a list here of things I want, that my discoveries in this last period of time, particularly when things are so heartbreaking, when things are so dicey, when it's so easy to fall into either a paralysis or panic. The first is, it helps me face both beauty and terror. I couple those two together because that's the reach of what it can open our heart minds to, enhancing our perception of the exquisite, the wondrous, the radiance, and at the same time, the appalling, the atrocious, the revulsive, the brutality, the young people planning together to do mass shootings at their school. Some are local, solo crazies, but this. And I've just come from a wonderful weekend of the work I do, work that reconnects, where it was based all on the poetry of Rilke, with which I'm somewhat besotted. And having brought out 3 books of translations of Rilke with my co-translator, Anita Barrows, hasn't diminished my passion in it at all. And those two feature in, there's a poem, the one that's the most set to music of all of the requests in the Book of Hours, which was our first book, where the sacred, the earth is sending out the Bodhisattva, or each of us, saying these words: you, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. So let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. And your capacity to open to one increases your capacity to discern and hold the other. And it relates to the teachings I find in the journey I've made and in the Buddha Dharma. It's right there in the First Noble Truth and in the Four Noble Truths. Dukkha, suffering is. Don't be afraid of it. In our culture, we tend to be afraid of the suffering, and so we don't want to even look at it. And we drug ourselves silly to keep from feeling it. So in this period of this, my second round with the net of Indra, I see that this the beauty and the terror, I'm learning to see that the insanity and destructiveness is not just some invasion of demented people, or but that those are fit perfectly with what the Buddha was teaching about the causes of suffering, the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. And that in our time they've reached such overweening, institutionalized, organized forms, whole other systemic level of greed, hatred, and delusion. The greed in the consumer economy. The hatred embodied in our need for a huge military. And by latest count, our military is spending more than the next 9 nations with big military combined. That we're just, and that's the solution to everything. And then, what's the institutionalized form of delusion? Media, maybe. Infotainment, maybe. And so we have to be very discerning of that, and at the same time so patient with ourselves and each other. And not be afraid of it. Indeed, finding that when you can see the causes and see that the root of your feeling of distress, when you see what's happening to our prison system, the thousands put into solitary confinement, the use of prisoners to produce goods, so we don't need to send for manufacturing overseas, get it done in the prisons for much less. New forms of slavery, so much that just, but we have to take it in, says, and we can take it in, says the jewel net of Indra, says and the Buddha that it conveys, the Dharma conveys. And in the discovering is that the pain that we feel does not come from our craziness or from some neurosis. Let's not pathologize our pain for the world. It comes from caring. And so I don't want you ever to be embarrassed or reluctant to rage or weep for what is happening to your brothers and sisters and those who aren't even born yet in generations to come, and to our brother and sister species. And that pain for the world and your love for the world are like two sides of the same coin. And you can let that, instead of pathologizing and running from the pain, or popping pills or taking a drink, though I have certainly been known to do that. Let's not knock it all. Is that we can sort of, it helps us realize our solidarity, and realize that even to take in what's happening to our world, we need each other, as well as in the response, as Deborah said, of our collaborative action. So the promise is great for us to realize in this time, finally, really get it, that we belong to each other. And of course, there will be those who will want to, blame our woes on this group or that group, or those migrants coming in here. there'll be those, but more and more are there for you to link hearts with. This is the time for that. And you have it. You have that instinct. You know, look at, you're here. You know you don't want to do it alone. This is not the time for the Pratyeka Buddha. That's the solitary do-it-yourself Buddha. But this is the time for realizing how deeply we belong to each other. So the second discovery is then how vast that self is. We're coming out of 5 centuries and more of increasing focus and forming of the isolated individual, the hyper-individualism, with its need to get its place in the sun and to fight for everything and to compete with all. Oh boy, we've been cultivated in that by a culture that exceeds in its so many skills. We have so much to decondition ourselves from. And that's why it's so great that you're here and practice. Because it's not enough to say, oh yes, I get it, we're all one. I get it, we're all connected. That's not going to be enough. That's just an intellectual affirmation. But you're here ready to go right down into the engine room of consciousness, watching the breath, watching your thoughts, watching the feelings. And then coming together, and feeling in the very breathing that you do, that you're not doing that breathing. But Earth, the universe is breathing you, just as it's breathing the person on either side of you and everyone in this room. And even in that silent breathing, you can feel that solidarity. You get it? Yes. So that awareness of that awareness brings forth the Bodhisattva in you, which I define, I know that's, but it's used quite a bit here, isn't it? And the Bodhisattva is the one who knows that there is no private salvation. And actually, when you get down to think of it, would you want it? Would you want a private salvation? Okay, I'll pick one. You can go to heaven now. Will you want to leave us? No. Yeah. So there's no private salvation. We're going to wake up together this time, and we're doing it. And a telltale feature of that is, and a term I've loved so much, bodhicitta. That's the intention in you, the hankering in you to act for and live for the sake of life on earth. That matters to you. That it matters to you that life continue here on this beautiful blue-green earth and this soil and this sun and moon that's been put in our hands. And that calls out this intention. And that's the most important thing you have. It's the most important and beautiful thing. It's like they say, you know, my teachers say it's like a flame in your heart. And you just see that, and you want to be careful it doesn't get blown out. So, so it's not, don't ever get it confused with thinking that is being sure everything's going to be hunky-dory. But it's rejoicing in the fact that you can devote yourself or take a step toward the relishing of life on earth. So the self is something that become so big. And in the work that I have been doing over the last 35 some years, we discover that not being told that, but by how we interact and what we speak. Role playing is one, like the Council of All Beings. Anybody done the Council of All Beings here? Add away. So as you speak for another life form, stepping aside from that tight identification with the human into that more ancient form, they're all more ancient than us. We're the last ones on the block. And you feel an enlargement of the life that passes through you. You're richer for it. And we speak for the ancestors, and we speak for those of future generations. And it's very easy to do that. It feels the most natural thing in the world, and you realize that the life within you is far vaster than the social construct that bears your name and your passport and your job for your profession or anything attendant to this particular phase of your, this part of your life, which is from birth to death. Yeah. The jewel net of Indra opens us to vast periods of time because it extends through time as well as space. And we can find the future ones as well as the ancient ones almost circling around us, those like a cloud of witnesses. They're not, the past is not dead and gone. The future is not just an abstraction. But the very fact that our karma in this time, the acts that we're doing have consequences for as long as time will exist, through hydrofracking, through nuclear contamination, and through genetic modification. That means the future ones are right smack in the moment of our decision making. So we escape from linear, we can step out of linear time and find the very interbeing of past, present, and future. This is exceedingly, it bestows a sense of tremendous buoyancy, a sense of solidarity with all beings. And you take a great, incredible discovery that once you hang out with the future beings and thinking about them, praying for them, to them, letting them inspire you, that your context of your life widens. It goes before your birth and after your death. And you know what happens then? You get freed from being dependent on seeing the results of your own actions. Now that's a big deal. I mean, that's what is held up as enlightenment in the Bhagavad Gita and in Gandhi and others. But I always thought, oh, that's beyond me. Oh, I could. Because I do care about the results of my actions. But I know that I can't be dependent on them because a lot of what I do won't be evident for till I'm dead and gone. That's so liberating. I discover in the jewel net of Indra that there is a wonderful tolerance there for uncertainty, which is going to happen first, the great turning to a life-sustaining society, or the great unraveling, where things fall apart and systems unravel and lose coherence. And the future looks then dimmer and dimmer for complex life forms, complex enough to hold consciousness, self-reflexive consciousness. So that's scary, the destruction. It's exciting. It's a great turning. We can do it. And they're both happening at the same time. And the jewel net of Indra, with all the sparks and going out to all beings, said, that's where I belong. And I can't know how this drama's going to turn out, but I give myself to it. And that breeds a sense of trust in the vitality, a trust that Rilke puts at the end of his Book of Hours. And where he says, I thank you, deep power, earth power, the reciprocal power of the universe. I thank you that this power works me ever more lightly in ways I can't make out. The day's labor grows simple now, and like a holy face held in my dark hands. And you're suddenly relieved from having to mastermind everything. To step back and receive the gifts from the other beings, that the gifts from life itself, from the web of life itself, and let that flow through you. Life is so much bigger than what we can plan. So I thank you, great Dharma, for ways that inviting us to understand the mysteries to which you point. The mysteries that keep appearing to us, and to be ready, help us to be ready for them, of what can happen when we interact, when we speak our truth, when we take in the suffering and behold the beauty. They go hand in hand. And at this time of climate chaos and war making, it's all so intricately interwoven. The climate chaos that's facing us is the collective expression. This we see, whether it's in Black Lives Matter, or the fast food movement, or the peace voices in the wilderness, just listening to Kathy Kelly back from the work for peace in Afghanistan. All of that's happening in our cities. It's all part of our climate change. Climate change is not, or chaos, is not something you say, I'll give up working in the battered women's shelter, or I'll give up saving marine mammals and fight against climate change. They are climate change. Climate change is a reflection of our massive idiocy and our need to me first for the three sources of suffering. And so we know what to do. We know perfectly well what to do. We know to love our world. We learn to receive its gifts. We learn to trust the heart. We learn to have a good time. Do we have time to listen the last 3 minutes, and we'll hear it better from the start now, I think.
When a Bodhisattva attains the 10 wisdoms, She can then perform the 10 universal entrains. What are they? To bring all the universes into one pair.
Or one act.
And one pair into all the universes. To bring all sentient beings' bodies into one body. And one body into all sentient beings' bodies. To bring inconceivable kalpas into one moment, and one moment into inconceivable kalpas. To bring all the Buddha's dharmas into one dharma, and one dharma into all the Buddha's dharmas. To bring an inconceivable number of places into one place, and one place into an inconceivable number of places. To bring an inconceivable number of organs into one organ.
Our coming here. The presence we've brought. The centering we've experienced on the mystery of the life within us and our belonging to this beautiful world, this dewdrop world. All of that, such a gift, and we offer it to the welfare of all beings.
So we thank you all for coming, and we so deeply thank you, Joanna, for coming through all that traffic tonight and coming to Spirit Rock, and also just great gratitude for all that you have given and keep giving to our world. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.